So welcome to today's session. So I'm happy to host and moderate the first session today, which will be on learning in 02139, our zip code here in Cambridge. And so I'm Christine Ortiz. I'm a faculty in engineering, and I'm also the Dean for Graduate Education at MIT. And I'll be moderating with this really innovative and distinguished panel. So first I'll go through and give some brief introductions to each of our panelists. I was asked to say a few words about my intentions for the future of education, so I'll just say a few words about our planned project, and then each of the panelists will talk for about 15 minutes, and then we'll go into a Q&A, and I'll ask a few questions, and we'll take questions from the audience. So, starting to my left is Mitchell Resnick. He's the Lego Papert Professor of Learning Research. He's also the Associate Academic Head of the Program in Media Arts and Sciences, so I've had a chance to work with him in that capacity and also visit his lab on a few occasions. So his lab is the Lifelong Kindergarten Group, and Mitch explores how new technologies can engage people in creative learning experiences. His research group developed the programmable brick technology that inspired the Lego Mindstorms robotics kit. He co-founded the Computer Clubhouse Project, a worldwide network of after-school centers where youth from low-income communities learn to express themselves creatively with new technologies. Resnick's group also developed Scratch, which is now sort of a world-famous online community where millions of children program and share interactive stories, games, and animations. Mitch earned a BA in physics from Princeton University and MS and PhD degrees in computer science at MIT. So our next panelist to the next left over is Saeed Arida. So he has a very interesting title, which I guess you gave to yourself. It's Chief Excitement Officer at Nuvu Studio in Cambridge, which, if you haven't taken a look at it, looks pretty amazing. So Saeed he's the founder of a full-time innovation school studio based in Cambridge. Nuvu is paving the way for a new studio education model at the high school level that nurtures students' creative and innovative skills through project-based collaborative design. Nuvu also works with schools to introduce integrated studio programs through the development of innovative curricula, teacher training, and on-the-ground pedagogical and technical support. The studio management system developed at Nuvu is currently used by thousands of middle, high school, and university students across the globe. Saeed received his PhD in design computation in the Department of Architecture at MIT, where his doctoral research examined the intricacies of the creative process and the nature of creativity. Prior to studying at MIT, he earned a bachelor's in architecture from Damascus University in Syria. And then lastly, to the most left of me, someone who probably doesn't need much of an introduction at MIT, is Tom Magnanti, Institute Professor and Professor of Operations Research. So he previously served as our Dean of Engineering, head of the Management Science area of the MIT Sloan School, co-director of the Interdepartmental Operations Research Center, founding co-director of the Leaders for Manufacturing and System Design and Management programs. He's the founding director of the Singapore MIT Alliance for Research and Technology, or SMART, and of course, he's the founding president of SUTD, Singapore University of Technology and Design in Singapore, which of course has been a very, very different model and has done amazing things in terms of thinking about new models for higher education. So Tom holds a bachelor's in chemical engineering from Syracuse University, as well as a master's in statistics, a master's in mathematics, and a PhD in operations research from Stanford University. So it's a privilege and an honor to be on the panel with our distinguished guests today who are really charting a really innovative pathway in all at levels of education. So I was asked to say a few words about the project that I'll be embarking on. So I'll be stepping down from my role as Dean for Graduate Education on July 1st, and after many years at MIT. The project we'll be embarking on is thinking about a redesign of the research university, and many of the features have been drawn from many of the features that our panelists will speak about today, as well as lots of the innovation and education that has happened at MIT. Some of these include a focus on project-based learning, digital delivery of knowledge, a transdisciplinary research structure. Our initial thoughts are how can we create a university without on-ground lectures, without traditional classrooms, no majors, and even no distinction between undergraduate and graduate education, just a continuous sort of learning pathway. In addition, some of the key things that we've been working on and we're really interested in is personalized curriculum design, so individualized learning pathways for students. We're building a platform on precision computationally assisted curriculum design for the knowledge component of it. One of our themes that we've been developing is the intersection between science, technology, and humanity, and how to integrate those much more closely, enabling the university to be a societal platform that engages the world more thoroughly in developing in science and technologies for the world. How do we embed collective intelligence into the university, reducing cost of education, scalability, increasing access, and fostering diversity and inclusion. And so those are some of the big topics that we're sort of tackling over the next planning phase, which will be over the next probably 5 years or so. So with that, I will hand it over to the first speaker today. It's Mitch Resnick. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here today, because I think it's really important how MIT thinks about learning and education. Of course, it's important for the students here in Cambridge 02139, how MIT thinks about learning and education. But it's also important for people around the world, because the ways that MIT thinks about learning and education serve as a model and can have a real influence for how people around the world think about learning and education. And the tools and techniques and technologies and approaches developed here at MIT can spread to the world and really be used to bring new approaches around the world. So I want to think a little bit about how the ideas at MIT can spread out to others around the world. Now, of course, there's no singular approach to learning and education at MIT. But if you look back historically, I'd see two main threads that you might follow of two core approaches that contribute to the MIT experience. One core thread to the MIT experience is the lecture. A lot of MIT students, especially in their first years at MIT, spend a lot of time in lecture halls like this. There's a photo of a calculus class at MIT. And this type of lecture-based approach to education, you might see it as a broadcast model of education and learning, that someone is broadcasting information to learners. And a lot of the emphasis in improving this approach goes to how can we better communicate and broadcast this information so that it helps people learn. And there's a lot of emphasis on that and refined over the years. It's not always an individual lecturer that's broadcasting in this way. As computers have entered education, computers are now used to broadcast information to students. Oftentimes, in many online learning situations, are based on this type of model of being able to reach a larger number of students by broadcasting high-quality lectures to students. So this is one thread of MIT education. But there's another thread of MIT education and learning, which I like to call the kindergarten approach to learning and education. And I've always been inspired by the way children learn in kindergarten. And it's because if you look at the traditional kindergarten, children spend a lot of time playfully designing and creating things in collaboration with one another. They might be building towers out of blocks, and in the process, learn about stability and what makes things stand up or fall down. Or they might be making pictures with finger paints and crayons, and in the process, learn how colors mix together. So this approach where children are constantly learning about the creative design process and learning important ideas in the process of designing, creating, and expressing themselves. And we see some of this kindergarten approach in classes at MIT. One of the most famous is the undergraduate class, the Introduction to Design that Woody Flowers started in the mechanical engineering department. So I pulled out an old video of this. It's a video that happens to feature the current Chief Technology Officer of the United States, Megan Smith. But this is from the 1980s when she was an undergraduate taking Introduction to Design at MIT.
Megan Smith. Her cart's been simplified during development, and now it's a tough machine. It's an easy first round for her, too.
So at least for Megan, this started her off on a path to become Chief Technology Officer. And in my mind, it's led lots of students to lead very creative, innovative careers. This was from the 1980s. I also pulled a clip from the 1990s where this class from mechanical engineering inspired a class in electrical engineering where they were making autonomous robots. And actually, they were testing out with some students from our group at the Media Lab who were developing technologies that were then used in this activity for the autonomous robot design competition that was known as 6270. So basically, the students both spend a month during IAP designing designing the robots, and then programming the robots to then compete autonomously against one another. At the end of IAP every year, it's held in a large lecture hall where the robots compete, and it draws large audiences, as the original one did. I think some of the things that really strike me about this activity is the way that it cuts across the disciplinary boundaries. The students who work on this learn ideas from many different engineering and science disciplines in doing it, while participating in a meaningful activity that, as you can see from these clips, really engages both audience and participants alike. So you can see here, this is one where one of the robots is winning at PAX auditoriums. And with this video, I thought this was speeded up, but it's not speeded up. This is actually real time. So when I look at this approach to education, which again, I might call the kindergarten approach, I see that it's characterized by what I call the 4 Ps of creative learning: projects, passion, peers, and play. And you can see that in these activities. It's very project-based. The kids are learning about the entire design process of starting with an idea, carrying through on a project. So learning not just about specific concepts, but how to carry out a project. They're working on things they care deeply about, and we've seen over and over that people are willing to work longer and harder and persist in the face of obstacles and challenges when they work on things they care about deeply. Peers, you can see from these videos, it's teamwork, people working together. Learning is not just about sitting there like Rodin's thinker, but interacting with others in collaboration. And play, and by play, I don't just mean having fun, but in my mind, a playful spirit and a playful approach to learning involves one where you take risks, try new things, test the boundaries. So I think all innovation and creativity grows out of that playful spirit of being willing to try new things, experiment, and test the boundaries. I think this idea of projects, passion, peers, and play is more important today than ever before. We live in a time that I think we all recognize things are changing more rapidly than ever before. So a lot of what's learned today will be obsolete tomorrow. What's most important is for people to learn to think and act creatively. And I think that's what we see happening in those videos that I just saw, is young people developing as creative thinkers. And that's going to be what's the key to success and, in my mind, happiness in the years ahead, whether in the workplace, in their communities, or in their personal lives, that ability to think and act creatively that's supported by an education that's based on projects, passion, peers, and play. In my own research group, we're trying to see how can we take this element, this approach to learning, which we've seen in the traditional kindergarten, we see in some of the activities at MIT, how can we reach across everywhere in the world to support learners of all ages? So we've tried to bring these ideas down to younger kids. So like with those robot design competitions, the initial ones at MIT were based on our prototypes for what led to Lego Mindstorms. And then there are robot competitions around the world. I visited Singapore. This was the National Junior Robotics Champion of Singapore that I met. And I saw the creative things he was doing with the technology. Or we worked on another robotics kit for younger kids called the WeDo Kit. These are some kids in Japan, as young as 6, 7 years old, starting to design in the physical world, design on the computer to make their creations come alive. Here's an example from some of the work we did at one of the after-school centers in Boston of kids using this technology to work on projects. We gave them the task, design something that's meaningful to you in your everyday life. And here's what they came up with.
Yeah, see? It just beeps.
Christina Costa is trying to build a better mouse trap. Make that gerbil trap.
Every time they want to go inside this gerbil house, they press this light sensor.
It's one of the many inventions created at this free math and science camp run by the Computer Museum and the Girl Scouts, where girls from Boston are devising everything from an odometer for rollerblades to a diary security system.
When someone touches this to try to open the diary, it'll take a picture of that person.
So like if your creepy little brother tries to read your diary?
Yeah.
He's on camera.
Yes.
One thing I like about these examples is you can see how the girls in this video really are working on things that are close to their heart, things they're passionate about. The first girl was not just building a house for any hamster, she was building a house for her hamster, and she wanted to have a nice automatic door. She also then later collected data. She wanted to know what the hamster was doing while she was at school, so she collected data. When was the door opening and shutting, and what was the activity of the hamster? Or the girl with the rollerblades, she wanted to know how fast she was going. And in school, when they had learned about converting units and doing those calculations, she hadn't been paying attention. But now she had a reason. She wanted to know how to convert from the revolutions per second that the sensor gave to miles per hour, because she wanted to know how fast she was going in miles per hour. So we see kids learning important knowledge in the context of meaningful projects. Of course, this is an example where we're providing new tools and approaches for kids to make things in the physical world. We know today kids, and adults as well, spend a lot of time online and in virtual worlds. We want to bring that same spirit to the online world. It's not enough just to be pointing, clicking, browsing, chatting online. We want kids to be designing, creating, experimenting, exploring, expressing themselves online, just as they do in these videos. Bring that kindergarten approach to kids' online experiences. With that in mind is why we developed the Scratch online community that Christine mentioned. Again, this is an online site where kids can create their own interactive stories, games, animations, and share them with others. They do this by snapping together graphical programming blocks. So they snap together these graphical blocks, some like snapping together Lego bricks, but they make scripts to control the behaviors of different characters in their stories or games. In this case, a game where you're having a fish eat other fish. After you make it, you can then share, and your project is shared on an online community. Today, these days, the Scratch online community gets more than 20,000 new projects every day from kids around the world. It's the most heavily trafficked subdomain of the whole MIT website. It gets more traffic than the MIT homepage, and it's all from kids around the world, usually age 8 to 16, learning to design, create, and express themselves online. Just to give you a better sense, I'll give you an example of one of these young people. This is a young person. It turns out she's a teenage girl in California. She goes by the username Ipsy on Scratch. On one of her projects, she lists some of the things she likes to do. Like many teenagers in California, she likes Disneyland, Pokemon, Adventure Time. One of the things she says she likes best is she loves to draw. She spends lots of time every day drawing and sketching. And one of her friends told her about Scratch and said, Scratch is a place where you can make your drawings come alive. And Ipsy had never done any computer programming. She knew nothing about it. But the idea of making her drawings come alive was something that interested her. So this was one of her first projects. And I like this because you can see she has a drawing, and she just makes little things move. You see the ears are moving and the eyes move. So it's as if she's dipping her toe in the water. She's trying out this new world, starting with something she's comfortable in, and then putting together the script, putting those blocks together to create the little animation. Over time, she started to make more and more complex animations, oftentimes drawing on her own interests. So I don't know if you know the children's books, The Warrior Cats. So this is a project that she did that allows you to explore the world of the Warrior Cats, her favorite book series. So in this case, you can imagine yourself as one of the cats and you explore the behavior of the different clans of cats. So it's this elaborate online world that she created for other people to explore. As other people started using Ipsy's projects, they really liked what she was doing, and then many people really loved her artwork. You can see it's nice artwork for a teenager to be creating. And some of them started writing in the comments below. They said, can we use your artwork? Could you make some more things for us? So then Ipsy started making some projects that just had artwork for other people to use. So like here's an example. And you see she even brands it as Ipsy Studio. And she starts having some of her artwork. And on there she says, you must credit me if you use any of these sprites. You can edit them as much as you want. So again, she's learned to be a good citizen of an online community, how to share and work with others. So it's learning about the open source culture by being part of this community. But it wasn't just sharing her artwork, she also shared her code. Like one thing that's not so easy to do in Scratch is to have scrolling backgrounds, as you see in many games like Mario Brothers. But Ipsy figured out how to do scrolling backgrounds. So she made this project that's a tutorial explaining how to make scrolling backgrounds. So she shows others, here's the blocks to put together. If you then look inside, you can see the code, and she explains to others how it is that you can make your own scrolling backgrounds. So if you look at projects like these, and again, I have never met Ipsy, I've never talked to her, but seeing what she's done online, you get the sense that she really is learning through projects, passion, peers, and play. She's clearly working on these projects. She's made more than 100 projects on the Scratch community, work on things she's passionate about, her drawing, the warrior cats. She interacts with others by making artwork for others, make tutorials for others, work on collaborative projects with others, and constantly experimenting with new things in a playful spirit. So I think this is exactly the way that we want to support young people growing up in today's society, and it's so important to support them that way. So I think what we really need to do as we look ahead, of course we need to continue to work on the education here at MIT to see that we can continue that spirit of the kindergarten approach here at MIT. But I think also we want to make sure that this approach to education and learning, the 4P approach of projects, passion, peers, and play, influences everybody of all ages, and explore what we can do from MIT to make sure that everybody has these same opportunities. So I end with some apologies to John Lennon saying, all we're saying is to give peas a chance. So thanks very much.
I don't know how I can match the precision of Mitch. 30 seconds over time. That's pretty amazing. So this is my talk, More Seeing and Learning. So I grew up in Syria. All my schooling was about rote memorization, content delivery, and standardized tests. I think probably I lost all my memory cells during that process. I cannot remember anything anybody says, even my girlfriend what says to me. So when I came to this country in 2002, I started realizing that schools in this country are actually not so different from where I grew up. They are not even so different from how school looked 100 years ago. Another thing that really shocked me here is this whole notion of senioritis. I cannot even know how to pronounce it. You can read the Wikipedia description. It has its own entry too. Basically, this is when high school kids get into college, and basically for the whole semester, they are as detached from their learning environment as they could be. And because they really see the only point of their high school experience is really to move to the next stage, which is college. And the minute they get into college, basically they think that their job is done. On the other hand, if you are in college, basically you are producing your thesis, which is the most important work that you have done throughout your studies. So I studied under George Steiny in the design computation group at MIT. I got my PhD between 2004 and 2010. And during that time, I started digging deeper into creative learning and what that means. And I started realizing that we are really missing a big chunk of learning, which is the one that is focused on seeing. All what we do during a lot of the K-12 education is really dumping all the rules and these kids' brain. The picture that Mitch showed basically is exemplary of that, where we just kind of spoon-feeding them everything that they need. We are taking the agency out of these kids, and we are telling them this is exactly what you need to learn at every grade, and this is when you graduate by learning. You graduate when you learn all of these things. So when I started digging deeper into shape grammars, I started realizing that knowing the rules is only half the picture. The other half is basically seeing. You need to be able to look at the world, see newer perspectives. I can look at something, another person can look at it, and we can see completely two different things. So we still need to be able to see and then apply the rules, but these two things basically have to be together. And at the same time, I started teaching design studios with Mi Jin Yoon in the architecture school. And I started realizing how effective the studio model is in teaching creative thinking and teaching basically the whole notion of seeing. And this is basically how designers think. At any given design juncture, when they have to make a decision, in their head, basically, they are looking at these different ways of seeing, and they are in their head testing all the consequences of these different design moves, and basically deciding on the best one that works. This is when we basically, when our students come from a traditional environment, and we ask them to do that, basically what they do is that, okay, I decided to add a wheel here, so I'm gonna just do it, and I'm then gonna add a wall here, and I'm gonna do it. But then you ask them, what were the alternatives? Why did you make those decisions? That process is really not there at all, and because we've never really trained our students to do that. So this is what's really great about the architecture studio, that we really teach the students how to cycle through these multiple viewpoints and how to basically pick the best one. And obviously, the process is the opposite of linear. It's very messy, and it can be very disorienting. So it's really our role to make this process as transparent to the students as possible. And at the core of it really is a critique process at the core of the architecture studio. This is how we teach the students how to basically cycle through all these different viewpoints, and this is how we teach them how to see. By basically sometimes even forcing them to basically move from one area of the table to another area of the table so they can look at what they have done and they see something different that they have not seen before. So the role of the students basically after they get that feedback is that they have to take that feedback and they have to synthesize it and produce something new. And then they have to show it again to the instructor and get more feedback and get multiple viewpoints and then basically do it again. And the hope is that after 3-4 years, you develop this mindset and you start doing it by yourself. So being at MIT for 8 years, that puts a lot of pressure on you to kind of create something with an impact. So what I wanted to do is basically take all that research that I've done and start a school from scratch. And basically, by doing this, I knew that I was going against the current, and I really need to find some visionary people and parents who are not afraid of basically trying different things. So we connected with a private school in the area here called Beaver Country Day School. And it's like, yes, we are very progressive, so you should just take our kids and do whatever you want to do with them. And that's kind of the best answer that I had. So some of the principles that we wanted to kind of use to organize the whole kind of experiment. First, we wanted to be completely off the grid. We wanted to basically do all the educational experiments we wanted to do without basically needing to do any tests or report to anybody. The second one, we wanted to have the studio pedagogy as really the core or the organizing principle of the whole curriculum. The third one is the transparent pedagogy. I don't know how many of you are architects here, but my experience always in being a student and in being a teacher is that when you get students from a traditional environment and put them in a studio environment, it's very disorienting. There is a lot of crying that happens, and even at MIT, we have always, like, if you don't cry your first year, there's something wrong with you. So for us, when we started working with teenagers, we started realizing that we have to be very transparent about this pedagogy. So I give them some sort of a presentation that looks similar to this almost every week, just to kind of tell them that when we are critiquing you, we are not critiquing you as a person, we are critiquing your ideas, and your ideas are artifacts of you, so they are really separate. So we really need to kind of hold them throughout this process so they understand what we are trying to do with them. The other piece is collaborative. Is that I was, a little bit traumatized by my PhD experience working on something for 6 years by myself. So I thought, it's like, I mean, it would have been amazing if I worked on it with someone else. And this is a note for MIT, so they can introduce collaborative PhDs. That would be awesome. So all of our projects are basically done in groups. All the students are forced to work with 2 others. And you can see that that when they start doing this for the first time, it's really hard. They are not used to it, and there's a lot of social engineering that needs to happen. But imagine that we can do this with kids when they are young, and after even 3 months, you can really start seeing the impact that something like this is having on them, how they can basically negotiate with whole team members, how to do something, how to push an idea, and how to work together. The most complicated piece for us basically is the last one, which is how to find instructors, we call them coaches, who can teach the studio environment. On one hand, we had architects who basically knew how to see and knew how to drive a creative process, but they don't necessarily have the rules that an engineer has. The engineers, basically, on the other hand, they have all the rules, but they are not trained in a way to see. And this is, I'm going to fight with Tom with this one. He used to be the dean of the engineering school at MIT, so it's his fault. So what the formula basically that we decided on basically is to have 2 people at the same time teaching the studio. So at any given studio we need to have the architect and the engineer working together basically with the kids to work on the problem. And this is how we design our curriculum. We don't have standard courses at all. What we have is a series of studios that last for 2 weeks. We give the students a problem to solve, and they have to solve it within the span of 2 weeks. And this is our space. It looks pretty much like an architecture studio. We are based in Central Square. And you can see the students are engaged in the material that they are working on. We have also a lot of tools. A lot of people now who come to our school and visit, which happens a lot, they think of us as a makerspace, and I always kind of need to stop them there and tell them, no, we are a school. Because for us, it's not really about the tools. When we started without tools at all, because for us, it was all about the pedagogy and how you can take that and make it the underlying principle of the school. Then having the tools basically kind of allowed our students to produce something that is a lot more elaborate than before. So this is when a lot of schools come to us, is like the first thing that we tell them is really you have to change the pedagogy before you kind of start getting all these tools. We also started realizing that a lot of the technologies that manage kind of the learning experience out there, a lot of them are focused on the traditional teaching. And there is nothing that is focused on studio-based education. So we started basically developing products that work better for us. And one of the biggest kind of things that we created is what we call a studio management system. And the whole focus of it is basically to document the students' work and basically allow them to reflect on the design decisions that they are making on a daily basis. We also started developing a lot of tools on top of that would help us track the students' progress. So in our case, for instance, we don't just assess the students. The whole point of it is that we ask them to track themselves, and then we track them, and we only kind of interfere when we see there is a mismatch between how we are seeing them and how they are seeing themselves. We also started developing a lot of tools that would help us kind of translate what we are doing into the regular system. So in terms of skills and mindsets and all of that. So this is the story of 2 students, one who was adopted from Afghanistan, who sits in a wheelchair. He used to go to CRLS, the Cambridge Public High School here. He always thought of himself as an inventor, but he was always sitting kind of miserable in a classroom doing subjects. And another student who was also the same, she left kind of the school because she could not really adapt to the whole kind of course system. And so both of them and a group of others started working on a project to improve the wheelchair experience of this one student. And one of the projects that came out of that is a hand crank that you can attach to the wheel, so that would allow you to kind of move the wheelchair in a rowing motion. So the reason why they wanted to do this is basically wanted to democratize that technology by taking something that cost $5,000 and 3D printed, so it will cost only $40. And they turned it into a kit that a lot of people all over the world now are printing and using. So basically, they managed to create something for $30 that a lot of people use. And this is when Obama broke it in the White House. So this is the limits of 3D printing. When you have a carpet that is sticky, then it's not good. But this is for a kid who within a year basically went from being very frustrated with the school, the school is not matching what he thinks of himself, into a point where he's producing something that is not gonna just have an impact on himself, but is having an impact on the world. This project is a little bit more whimsical, and it's to address a problem that I had, which is being Syrian, I could not find any falafel in Central Square. Probably a lot of you have this problem too. We have a place nearby that even calls it chickpea fritter. They don't call it falafel. So we wanted to re-engineer the whole falafel experience, and part of it also, we wanted the students to engage with the community. So you go and eat lunch all the time. So what are the food that you want? Can you take something that is very well established and change the experience of it? So we came up with this idea to do donut falafel, so it's bigger. And if you are a structural engineer, you would love this, because the whole falafel becomes kind of the structural element, so that the sandwich is very stable. And then you put all of the kind of the ingredients on top of that. And then the time came to design the cart, and the students wanted to do something that reflects that kind of donut shape, so they came up with a donut-looking cart. And this is, for me, one of the most iconic images over the last 5 years, where you see this kind of donut walking on the street, and everybody is staring at it. So we do these now falafel days every month, and we take them out, and we engage with our students and with the community, and the hope is that we can make a lot more of these carts, and they are spread all over the city. Some of the more exciting work that we are doing now, or I would say the second phase of the work that we are doing after 5 years, basically, is link back to the system. I think for these 5 years, we've been off the grid, and intentionally so, because we really wanted to develop kind of and optimize the model that we have. And I think what we are doing now is more kind of linking back to the system, so we can help a lot of other teachers and schools do what we do. So we work with hundreds of teachers every year, and this is for us, we started realizing is that to have the impact that we needed to have on education in general, we needed to train the teachers. And we know that we know that we cannot just turn teachers into designers in a span of a week, but we are really seeing a lot of kind of transformation that's happening with those teachers, even after a week, where they can understand the potential of what we are trying to do. And a lot of these basically teachers are coming back, and we are working with them on a continuous basis. What we are doing also is work with schools, and that is more on an institutional level. So we are basically having these surgical interventions with the schools, where we can shift their pedagogy a little bit from traditional into more studio-based. And a lot of this is resting on the online platform that we've developed. So we don't completely do online studio education, but we do some sort of a hybrid model. So we use the online piece to basically critique the work online, to provide them with all the support that they need. So we are seeing how effective a hybrid model can look like. This is an example of what we are doing with one school. Basically, we have a 3-year plan with them to transition them from a completely traditional curriculum into something where half of it will be completely studio-based, and we keep the other half traditional. And I think just from my experience with the school is that we owe it to the students, basically, and the younger generation to provide them with an experience that is a lot more impactful. We don't want the students to basically get to at the end of the high school and they are completely not motivated to do anything. We want to have something the opposite, where now our students who are about to graduate, they are basically producing the best work that they could. And high schoolers in general, and even I would say middle school, they have so much to contribute to the world, and we just assume that they just need to learn something by dumping something on them. And what we are finding is that by creating the right environment for them, it's kind of incredible what they are able to do. Thank you.
Good morning. Sorry, I have a terrible cold, so I hope you can hear me. Good morning, everyone. A little bit of energy. You've been sitting there. Good morning, morning, morning. So I'm going to talk this morning about a new model, or a different kind of model, for undergraduate residential education, which hopefully has a fair amount of MIT DNA, MIT passion to it, but is a bit different in a variety of other ways. So I start with the following scenario. Olivia is a young woman. She wants to go to college. She's quite interested in technology and in impacting the world. She goes to university. Her first classes are going to be grounded in basic math and sciences, which is a good thing. So she's going to learn physics and chemistry and biology and mathematics. And she's going to do that by sitting in rooms about half the size of this. There's going to be 400 to 800 people in these lecture halls. And the scenario plays out, as it does at many universities, as follows. She has a lecture on Monday. There's a recitation session on Friday with a smaller group where they get a little bit more material. There's a homework set due the week after that. And because it's a big class, it takes a long time to grade the homework sets. And the week after that, the homework is given back to Olivia. So Olivia now has been exposed to some interesting, hopefully, material by a great lecturer. And it's literally 2 to 3 weeks before she gets any feedback as to whether she understands the material or not. Moreover, this is compounded by the fact that at the same time she's taking this physics class, she's taking a class in chemistry and mathematics. So she got rattling around in her brain concepts for all these classes in this feedback. It's even worse than that. In this lecture that she's got, because we have to organize around something in our universities, it's an hour-and-a-half lecture. I may have more than one, I might not have enough material to fill that full lecture with one concept, so I might do 2 or 3 concepts in that lecture. And this is all rattling around in her brain. So we know from cognitive sciences, learning sciences, neuroscience, this is a terrible, terrible way to learn. And we do it all the time. We do it all the time. We know that it's much better to have quick, multiple feedback loops, to have immediate response in terms of activities and the like. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a model for doing that. And this is now our second scenario for Olivia. So Olivia comes to university, and she's put into a classroom, as shown in this picture. I'll call it a cohort-based learning community. Mitch might call it kindergarten, right, in terms of this. It's easily reconfigurable. The tables are on wheels. There's an ability to break the room in half. And an ancillary room, so 50 students are in this room. We put 50 students in the room. This is going to be a cohort-based learning community. We try to provide for gender diversity, ethnic diversity, learning style diversities, international diversities in this classroom. And so now she goes to this classroom and she gets the same concept that she had in scenario 1, might be momentum in physics. But rather than waiting 3 weeks for it, there's a 5-minute lecture or lecturette on this, and then immediately she's going to be solving a problem on this, or she's going to be building something with it, reinforcing the fact that, one, do I understand the material or not, and secondly, is it useful or not in terms of putting it to place. Now, you can do this in a wide variety of ways. You can do this by having little lecturettes in class. You can flip the classroom. You could use MOOCs. And this would be, I use the MOOC that's provided for this in a digital way. I'll call this moderated modular education. So it's modular in terms of we're going to take our education and break it up into smaller modules, not hour-and-a-half modules, but it's moderated. It's not broadcast to the world, it's moderated. In this case, there's 3 faculty in the classroom in this picture. These faculty are there as mentors, coaches, rather than as traditional teachers in the usual way. Now, which of these 2 alternatives do you think is more engaging? Which of these 2 alternatives do you think is going to provide for a better education? Which of these 2 alternatives do you think is going to be more fun for the faculty in terms of teaching? In the first alternative, perhaps halfway through the semester, the teacher gets some feedback on whether the students are learning or not. In the second alternative, they're getting constant feedback for this. So this is the core of the model that I want to present to you. I'll present some other things to you as well. Now, if we wanted to make sure that we create creativity in our students and all, or innovation in our students, the National Creative Engineering issued a report. I'm not going to go through this in detail. And this chart is my articulation of what they said in this report. I just want to point to a couple things in here. One is this notion of identifying problems as well as solving problems, of being creative. This slide underestimates the notion of knowledge of their field, so understanding the fundamentals of their field, basic math and sciences for us in the right ways. Providing an environment, providing freedom to think, providing space to think, and space to do things in a variety of ways. We're going to take this as part of motivation again for what I'm going to tell you in the following slides. So this is a new university we've been developing in collaboration with MIT. Well over 100 MIT faculty have been involved in the creation of this university. You see its mission statement here. It's not unlike MIT's mission statement. It's drawn from it, though perhaps it's explicit in this educating technically grounded leaders and innovators, but through a multidisciplinary curriculum. Now, I'm going to, just as a little bit of fun, a little bit of back to the future, I'm going to compare MIT in 1916 in this university. Now, I can do this in a way that others can't because I was here in 1916 as we crossed, not quite, but about halfway through the century I was here, right? So, but some interesting comparisons. So the campus size was about the same as this new university. The building size was about 15% different in terms of the new university. The organization was that MIT had no schools. There was no School of Engineering, no School of Science in 1916. It had courses of study. This university has no schools, no deans. Sorry, Christine, no deans. Right? I was one for a long time. For the first time in its history, MIT graduated over 300 students in 1916. SUT just graduated 300. And the orientation is minds that matters, much like MIT's. So this is ways in which they're similar, but they're different in some other ways. So this is the yin and the yang, right? So one, the curriculum, MIT at that time, I would argue, was inside out. To learn mechanical engineering or civil engineering, you went out to the world. I'll show you an outside-in curriculum, quite a bit different. Classrooms, I think, at MIT were basically lecture-based. This is going to be this cohort-based learning community classrooms in terms of what we're doing. The faculty offices, Mark told us yesterday about how they were permeable membranes, but still the faculty were assigned by department. Course 1, Course 2. We assign by theme, right? So there's a transportation set of faculty, sustainable set of faculty to provide this multidisciplinary curriculum. Of course, our library is quite different than MIT's library. Our library is one that's mostly digital and has things like self-checkout using technology in interesting ways. And then finally, and this is, I think, as much a social thing as anything else, MIT at that time was about 1% female. We're about 43% female. I'm very proud of that. So this is a busy diagram, which is the curriculum. I'm just going to do this quickly for you. But so we organize, and again, the usual engineering disciplines are organized around inside out. What does the world fundamentally need? The world fundamentally needs products, services, and systems. It needs products, it needs services and systems. So rather than organizing around traditional disciplines, why don't we organize around products, services, and systems? I would argue that the organization of our engineering schools in the world, in many ways, is an historical artifact. MIT started in 1861 with a mechanical engineering department, civil and sanitary engineering department, geological engineering department, architecture. Why? Because we knew at that point was statics. Later in the century, about the time MIT was founded, Coulomb, Kirchhoff, Henry, and others discovered the science of electrons. Later in the century, Tesla, Edison, and Westinghouse brought them to the marketplace, so we created something called electrical engineering. So you can look at the patterns of the creation of the engineering departments, but what we teach fundamentally in civil engineering, aeronautical engineering, mechanical engineering, is fundamentally the same at its core. We teach structures, we teach materials, we teach dynamics, controls, et cetera, but we divide them because of this historical artifact. Instead, let's divide by products, services, and systems. So we have these 4 pillars: architecture and sustainable design, engineering product development, everything from nanotechnology up to jet airplanes, engineering systems and design, any large complex technical system of your choice. This could be energy, environment, transportation, manufacturing, healthcare, finance, as long as it's got a strong technical component. And then finally, information systems technology and design, computer software, computer engineering, big data, et cetera. Another way to think of this architecture is We'll divide our education up into the physical world, the digital world, and systems that brings them together. So it's a very different, even though the content of the curriculum might be very different, the sort of overall looking at an outlook is quite different in the sense that the students are always thinking, what are the products I'm going to do? What are the systems I'm going to create? What are the information systems and technologies I'm going to create? It's done with this active learning, and the active learning is done in a variety of ways, which I'll say. Now, we don't have degrees in healthcare, we don't have degrees in urban design, et cetera, but we have tracks in these. So by specializing a bit, you can get specializations in various fields that might be of interest to students, but keep the degrees themselves generic, keep them multidisciplinary, keep them very broad in this sense. I think we're best off doing. Now, we embrace so-called Big D design throughout the curriculum. And this Big D design here means all technically grounded design. So it's architectural design, process design, software design, systems design, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we also mean by Big D design not just the conception of a product, but the conception, development, prototyping, manufacturing, marketing, bringing it to the marketplace. And we embed design throughout the entire curriculum. So each course has elements of design in it. If you go to most universities, you'll take 30 to 40 courses over 4 years. Other than a senior project, no one ever tells you how these courses connect to each other. We suspend our courses in week 10, and we give a design experience that requires the knowledge of all the courses they're taking. And in the upper level years, we have also courses that cut across design exercises that cut across courses. We also have design exercises that cut across years. So as you learn more, you refine your design, and you get some sense of how you can build up more expertise. And then finally, in most curriculum these days, we crowd too much into the curriculum. So what we say is that we're going to restrict our students to taking only 4 courses a semester, and we're going to give them what traditionally would be the 5th course is theirs. They have ownership for it. They have responsibility for it. We call it the 5th row. There's no classes on Wednesday. There's no classes on Friday. They get to pursue their passions, their interests, much like MIT clubs in a variety of ways, but in a certain sense on steroids in terms of what they're doing. And through these design experiences, constant design experiences, the students, and through this cohort-based learning, they're working in teams, they're having to communicate their designs, so they're developing a set of skills that go far beyond the typical technical skills they're going to find in a university. So the pedagogy is indicated here. It's cohort-based learning communities, modularization, project-based and hands-out throughout the curriculum. There's learning objectives and measurable outcomes for every single course at the university. We use lecturettes, we use videos, open courseware. We're developing our own Khan Academy type material. We've adopted MIT's undergraduate research opportunities program and undergraduate practice opportunities program, but also developed an undergraduate teaching opportunities program for the students. Now I'm just going to show you a few pictures, right, in terms of this. So this is a signature design course. So what I didn't mention is all the students in their first year take a required course in world civilizations and texts, and a required course in social sciences. So like MIT, about a quarter of the curriculum is arts, humanities, and social sciences. All the students take a course in design, which brings together architectural design and engineering design. And this is just some examples of doing this in terms of developing these designs. There's active learning spaces throughout the campus in a wide variety of ways, a physics lab, think lab, OLab, this type of things. I think we have some of the best fabrication facilities in the world. So this is a big assembly space area with a crane over it. We have, I think, more 3D printers per capita than any place in the world. Each of these cohort classrooms has a 3D printer in it. We have a metal 3D printer in terms of what we're using as well. So in some ways, we're trying to combine as best we can inductive and deductive learning, not going to the extremes on either side in terms of doing this. These are just some pictures of the campus. Again, like MIT, it's intended to be a walking campus, an integrated campus, so that people will bump into each other, so they'll see each other, so it will foster multi-curriculum. We have on our campus 4 Chinese buildings donated by none other than Jackie Chan. Yes, the Jackie Chan. That one's a 200-year-old pavilion, but we have a Ming and Qing dynasty buildings on campus as well. It's the oldest building in Singapore, 500 years old, sitting on this campus. Again, try to blend the East and West in some ways. This is the central plaza for the university. This transforms itself, it seems almost every day, but certainly every week in terms of exhibitions and the like. These open staircases that provide fluidity and movement throughout the campus. Just more pictures of this in a variety of ways. This is bridges connecting the areas. You can think of this as part of the connections like you have through the hallways at MIT. As was described yesterday, there's two spines to this campus. One is called the Learning Spine. It's the Infinite Corridor, or the Student Street and Stadia Center on steroids. And one's the Living Spine, going back to the living. Just another picture. This is our library. There are a few books in the back, but not too many, right? And this is the self-checkout. So if you want to take something out of the library, a book or a device or something, check it out yourself in terms of doing it. And the library is more a gathering space than anything else. So just as a summary, we have embraced this notion of Big D, the strong grounding in technology and design. The fundamentals are really important. Unusual degree structure, very multidisciplinary, a very different approach to teaching in this sense. This notion of curricular integration. I haven't emphasized entrepreneurship and leadership in a wide variety of ways, blending the East and West. So hopefully we see, and this is an expression of MIT in a variety of ways, and it brings together the MIT of 1916 in terms of doing and active learning and these type of things, but embeds that with the great developments in MIT after World War II in bringing science, technology, and Haas to the table alongside these other things, doing it in a way that's refreshing. And I'll just conclude with saying that Olivia did make it. So she did come to SUTD. She was our valedictorian, right? So she experienced this curriculum. She is a serial entrepreneur. This ring that was developed as a ring she developed, it's a 3D printed ring. With this ring, you can go actually buy it in Boston right now for $25. You can access the subway system. So instead of having your Charlie card, you can do this. She's disgustingly talented. She gave a speech at our graduation. I gave a speech. The Minister of Education gave a speech. She gave the best speech by far. And she's the poster woman, I think, for this university in terms of the type of graduates we'd like to have. So I hope that gives you some sense of this somewhat different model of a residential education. But I think we're going to hear a lot later this morning about MOOCs and digital education. But I think residential education is here to stay. It's important, it's here to stay. We've got to figure out how to do it better than we do it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'll start with a few questions. Those were wonderful, inspirational, so much things to think about. So I guess my first question to the panel would be, how do you imagine the integration of virtual and the physical spaces to best facilitate learning in your different environments?
I do think there are lots of different ways. I don't think there's any one answer. So like when I think of, like when we started these after-school centers called computer clubhouses, there are places for young people to come together in low-income communities after school. And there's a real value of coming together, feeling that, of working together in person. On the other hand, once we had a network of 100 clubhouses, the young people are part of not just a local community they were working with, but a community of young people around the world. And they were really inspired and influenced by how young people elsewhere in the world thought about things, worked on things differently. So I think trying to always look for integration. And I think one of our key issues now is how to make sure that we can make the best use of each of those two environments. Again, I come back to my 4 Ps of projects, peers, passion, and play. Some of those things can be supported virtually, some can be supported more locally, and I think how we can try to make the best of both.
I think for us, we've been obsessed with this whole notion of how you can do studio-based kind of project work in a hybrid mode. So especially now with the work that we're doing with a lot of schools, is like how we can use the virtual as a way to kind of basically connect with partnering schools in a more meaningful way. So the students can basically upload their work. We can look at them from afar. We can leave a lot of comments. We can also get a pretty good sense about the overall culture of that place by looking at how the students are documenting their work, how they are presenting it. So it's becoming, for us, not just for us in terms of the residential piece and having that online platform here, but also it's becoming more of an important piece as we work with a lot of partnering schools.
Yeah, I would say, I would sort of take sort of two components of that. One is digital content. And like books, we provide content and digital, and that's clearly useful, I think, for all of us. And the kids are pretty adept at finding the digital content. What's not as clear is digital experiences. So could we or should we provide digital experiences? And what are those digital experiences? And do they enhance learning in a wide variety of ways? The experience that you might get in one of these cohort classrooms or by going to a museum or other things of that nature, which is a bit different than saying, instead of having my textbook or instead of having a video, I'll have it in a video form or I have it in a digital form on the web.
You know, maybe in some ways, I sort of feel that people growing up in today's society are going to have experience online. So I think what we need to do is make sure there's support for the right types of experiences, the type that I think came across in all of our talks. So making sure that the experience online aren't just about browsing, looking, because there's great use of accessing information online, the digital content, but we want to make sure it's not just that. Because we want to make sure that there's a wide range of different ways of having that experience. I do think for the online courses, which MIT is making a big investment in, making sure that it's not just about delivering content, but making sure that it does support a wide range of experience.
I think there's the social experiences, but then you can think of things like virtual reality and these type of things as well, which I think are a bit different, right?
Yeah. So maybe I'll ask a provocative question that somebody asked me this week in discussions of our project. They said, why do you need a curriculum? Are we moving to a future where there's no curriculum? And so maybe you can think about answering the role of curriculum. Do we need a curriculum? Are we moving to a place where there's no formal curriculum?
So I guess for me, I do think there's important ideas that we think are important for everybody to engage with. So for me, what's most important is to have a sense of what are the important things, important ideas that we want people to engage with. But I don't think we want to have a step-by-step approach that's going to try to guide everybody through the same process of engaging with those ideas. I think we have to provide multiple pathways, but there are going to be common ideas that are important, but we really want to support a multiplicity of pathways. I think that's been the real failure of a lot of traditional curricula, is that they have one uniform pathway as opposed to multiplicity of pathways.
What is the alternative of not having a curriculum? What would you suggest?
Well, people had suggested to me just having a learning environment that students come in and chart their own pathways through, for example. There's one example,
I would argue that's at one extreme. It's inductive learning. We're going to learn inductively. I think your Scratch is inductive learning in many ways, right? It's one alternative. And the sort of traditional lectures is at the other end, very deductive learning. And I think we need both. Part of the role of universities is to understand, structure, and codify knowledge, and to then disseminate that in a variety of ways. And curriculum is one way we do that. Now, maybe other ways of doing it in terms of providing the curriculum in different ways, but I think having the curriculum is essential in some ways.
I think there is this misconception with a lot of schools that come to us that they think if you want to do project-based work, it has to be completely student-driven, and the role of the teacher is basically just being on the side, helping them with technical stuff. And we have to reframe the whole discussion with them that the instructor is still an essential piece, because if you leave the students to do stuff on their own, they're gonna basically do stuff only within their own frame of mind, and they're gonna basically expand beyond that. So we spend a lot of time basically creating that context for the students to operate on. So however you want to create it, it's really up to the teachers, but they really have to create that context that will expand the students' way of thinking around things.
I think what's important, we need to move away from, too often there's this dichotomy of either there's sort of top-down structure or do whatever you want from the pace of the learner. Yeah. And clearly neither of those extremes is the right thing. And too often we see structure as in opposition to agency, and we shouldn't see it that way. We should see, how we can sort of put in the right structures to support people and to support people being able to make their own choices and to find things. I do think there's a place for lectures, but I'd rather have people go and seek out the lectures when they need it for the things they're working on. So there's a role for the lectures, but having everybody sit at the same time for the lecture, to me, doesn't make sense. It's more, you should have access to it when you need it and when you want it.
So you bring up another interesting question that someone mentioned to me this week about providing content just in time versus just in case. Just in time, is when you access it when you need it, versus just in case is providing a holistic, structured, curriculum. So love to hear your thoughts on that.
You can start. You want to start?
Tom, I know you can.
You're looking to me. Well, I'm old and old-fashioned. I think we need some structure. I think we need some structure, and we need, part of what education does is it paces learning for the students in a variety of ways, and I think there's some use to doing that. Now we may be able to provide variety in that, but I think having some pace is quite useful. So I think some structure is actually quite useful in terms of the way we do things.
I think for us that we are starting to develop this even more now, having these what we call buckets of knowledge that are there when you need them. So as we are doing different projects and the kids needed some knowledge around gears and all of that, so we can give them the basics, but we send them basically to that bucket and just go investigate and watch a few movies together, like with your team, and then come back basically and integrate that. And I think having more of an expansive kind of collection of that would be amazing.
So one component of this is, we can think about doing things at small scale, but if you're thinking of doing things at large scale, what do we need structure for? And we've vowed to a system of structure in which we structure most of higher education around the world in 4-year curriculum, 8 semesters in that 4 years, 13 weeks per semester, of the order of 40 hours of lecture material or classroom per course and 120 hours outside of it. That evolved over time in part because we needed some standardization. If you've got a large university that's got 50,000 students, you need some structure to deal with those 50, I think. Now, you may be able to figure out how to do this without any structure. But
It's
people in the
not
audience.
structure or not, it's what type of structure.
Yeah.
So I really do
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's the type of structure that is there.
But this relates to Said's comments, that somehow we've gotten this notion that a course, we do things as courses. Courses are 40 hours of in-class experiences. If we just really thought of concepts and modularization, you could think of organizing the whole curriculum quite a different way. Now, how to do that at scale, though, I think is a real challenge for us.
I mean, I think it's one of the challenges when we talk about just in time, sometimes it makes it seem as though everything can just be a little module that you get just when you need it. And I think one of the challenges is there's certain types of expertise you need to build up over long periods of time.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to end up and you're being asked to play the piano at Carnegie Hall, and the night before you say, no, I need a lesson on how to play the piano, is not going to be very successful. And so we need things. But I think the answer isn't to try to put everyone through the same pipeline, but to put people in a culture where they're going to, like in the case of the piano, want to learn to play the piano. If kids grow up in a family that everyone appreciates music, they're going to want to play the piano, and they'll want to put in the time to build up the expertise. I think we need to do the same thing here. Since we value certain types of knowledge, we need to create a culture where people see the value of it and they want to be engaging with it because it's meaningful to them.
That's a great comment. So as you're talking, I'm thinking of other things. So so there's been this sort of discussion, I guess, in recent years about this sort of drill, 10,000 hours drill to really perfect the level of expertise that you need 10,000 hours to be the world expert in anything. And it's quite sort of the antithesis, right, of many of the things we've been talking about. So love to hear your comments on that, about this sort of 10,000 hours. I think that's about the time for a PhD, right? But go ahead, yeah.
Well, I spent 10,000 hours playing baseball, and I never made it to the Red Sox. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
I remember when I first heard those things, at first I saw that as depressing, that I thought it might be the antithesis. But then I was able to shift it around. For me, what it came to was, because I believe there's some truth to that, but it means that you better choose to work on things that you're passionate about, Because if you're not passionate, you're not going to be willing to put in the 10,000 hours. So this is something I say to my graduate students, you better find, it's hard work doing a dissertation, so you better choose something that you really care about or you're going to be miserable. But if you find something that you're truly passionate about, then you're going to want to put in those 10,000 hours. So for me, if you're told to put in 10,000 hours, then it's a chore. If you find something you're passionate enough about, you'd be delightful to put in the 10,000 hours.
And then this is where we go back to the structure piece. Like, how are you going to spend your 10,000 hours? Are you just on your own doing whatever training that you are doing, or you have the right experts, you have the right grouping and all of that? And this is where it seems like just doing 10,000 hours for the sake of doing it is not going to get you anywhere. You need that some sort of something that will organize that a little bit.
So I'll give you an example. I was sitting with a group of faculty and a couple students who are always on these committees with us, and the students were suggesting, well, we should outsource many of these menial experimental tasks that we're doing in the labs. And the faculty were like, no, actually, by doing it over and over and over again, you're actually learning, you're creating a specific type of scientist in the lab, and there's value to that. So this whole debate between the faculty and students, and so it's very, very distinguished faculty at MIT who were saying that, who felt that this was a core part of the training, that if you weren't doing this, you'd be graduating as a different kind of scientist. So just one example.
Well, I think Mitch's analogy, though, to performing arts or sports.
Right,
I mean,
right.
People shoot lots of free throws, right, to become good at shooting free throws.
Yeah.
They do it because they enjoy it, right? But it's quite mundane. It's quite routine in some level. And they do it when you learn an instrument in some ways, right? You spend hours and hours at the piano.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Interesting. Okay, let's see if I have any more questions before we go to the audience. So all of you have thought about, and many of you had success, in particular Mitch, about scaling and having impact transformatively, across the nation, across the globe. What do you, and from your experience, Mitch and others, what do you think we can do, either as a university, as MIT, or as citizens in this country, to have transformational change on many of the difficult things that you said about education?
I think the single most thing that can be done here that will change, I think, the face of education is college admissions. I think every time we go to high schools and we tell them you need to change, or go to middle schools and you need to change, it's like, but we cannot send our kids to high school. And then, the same thing with elementary, we cannot send them to middle school. And then obviously the biggest kind of, I think, bottleneck in this big chain is college admission. And there are a lot of experiments that actually happen until K-8, and then suddenly everything freezes, and then suddenly you go into an AP track and you do all of that, because this is what institutions like MIT requires. So imagine if we change that. I think within, I think, a span of 5 years, our educational landscape would look radically different if that happened.
So another thing that people have mentioned to me in recent years, so do you think that may come about through partnerships between K through 12, between secondary and post-secondary education, and creating more transferable pipelines? Yeah.
Well, we tried some things a while back. So we created a portal called OpenCourseWare Highlights for High School at one point, right? And the notion was, it wasn't overly ambitious, but it was to take the OpenCourseWare material and to map it onto some of the curriculum in the high schools and provide easy access to it. So I think there's things like that certainly universities can do. And MOOCs clearly provide an opportunity for doing those kind of things.
To me, the most important thing is helping to shift people's mindsets about learning and education. Because you could have the greatest partnership, but if it's facilitating the traditional approaches to education, it'll just become more deeply entrenched. So I think what's most important is to help people appreciate and understand the importance of shifting to new ways of thinking about learning and education for today's and more so tomorrow's society. And that's not an easy thing to do. We were talking the other day, I said I'm short-term pessimistic, long-term optimistic, because it's really hard to change systems. So to really scale the type of things we're talking about requires systemic change, and that's hard. We know it's hard. We can't expect to happen overnight. But I'm optimistic because I think the forces in society at large, it really requires new ways for people to thrive in tomorrow's society. People will need to be able to grow up as creative thinkers, so there'll be pressures to support people, to revise our institutions and our systems so that we will provide opportunities for learners to grow up as creative, innovative thinkers.
I mean, there might be a role for our government to facilitate that as well,
Yeah.
right? So, okay, so maybe we can start taking questions from the audience. So happy to have questions if you just step up to the microphone.
There's one on the left side, too.
Yep, there's one over here, too, and one over there.
Thank you. A question for Saeed. You mentioned the university admissions process and the effect it can have on change in K-12 education. What role do you think corporate or other organization hiring practices can have on university admissions?
Yeah, I was having this discussion with a few industry kind of partners, and they were telling me it will be actually easier to kind of get these students that we are graduating after senior year into the industry so they can work. That will be easier than trying to change the admission policies. You know, so that's because they are, you know, the kids we are graduating, it's really, you know, they are ready for a lot of stuff. And I think the industry can have a lot of, they can try to convince the universities that they also need to change a lot of these kind of practices because they need to get kids who are after college who are ready for work. I mean, we know this problem that a lot of kids who even finish college have a lot of issues kind of finding work and all of that. So I'm sure that the industry can play kind of a massive role in making that process a lot better.
So, you know, admissions is one thing, but retention's another. So about 50% of all students in the United States who enter engineering programs complete those programs, right? And we as educators should be very concerned about that. And we need to make changes in our educational system that makes engineering more fun, more engaging, so that if we can bring these students into the university, they'll find a rich environment in which they can succeed and we can retain them.
Work on meaningful projects. One of the things I really liked in Saeed's presentation was you really got this sense of people work on projects they felt meaningful. Mm-hmm. So I think trying to make sure that people have opportunities to work on things they find meaningful.
We'll go to this side. Yeah.
I'm a basic science researcher in academia in biology, and it seems like all the innovation in education is happening in the design and engineering field. Is there nothing happening for our field? Certainly biology and chemistry have become huge at MIT and across the world in innovation and knowledge base. I mean, certainly it's a different goal, you know, having worked in pharma and in academia, you know, so product focus versus, you know, puzzle solving. And so isn't there a place for that in a high school curriculum, and what kind of things can you suggest that could, you know, captivate that age group?
Well, I think that the things I talked about were really that cohort-based instruction for the freshman year was really all about math and science. So it was teaching math and science in this engaging way, not in the big lecture way. But also, working with Chris Kaiser, the former provost of MIT, our introductory natural science course is a combined chemistry and biology course. So as biology has become more molecular biology, it becomes closer to chemistry. And so, at least in substance, we bring them together in a rather unusual way. But I think all these pedagogical innovations apply throughout the curriculum, not just to engineering.
Yeah, and I'd add, I really am deeply committed to a design-based, project-oriented approach. But that can be applied to biology. There's a growing amount of work now, the same way that 20 years ago, you went and you saw community centers with computers where people could do things. Now they're maker spaces. But they're increasingly places where people are doing, you know, biotech things in a community basis. So bringing design-oriented approaches to learning biological things is something that is spreading and become more accessible to more people. So that's at least one approach that I would see as applying.
So, but it doesn't sound like it's possible in the NUVU model.
Yeah, we are struggling with that piece. So if you have an idea around that, that would be great. I mean, it's a lot. It's, you know, the hands-on, the more design and technology, they are more available, and that is kind of what we gravitate towards. And We've been looking a lot at the other things. Biology and chemistry is a big piece of that. And so we hope that we can kind of bring the same kind of mindset that Mitch is talking about in terms of design into that. There's no reason why it cannot happen. It's not readily available as the other stuff.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Martin Gomez from the Philippines. I was just wondering, a lot of the opportunities that you actually, and innovations that you actually talked about, especially for basic education, is a lot of them actually require major investment in terms of hardware as well as in terms of infrastructure. So I was just wondering, like for instance, in the developing world, perhaps access to software like Scratch would be easy, but to create robotics projects, for instance, would be quite a challenge. So I was just wondering if you have any ideas on how this can be addressed.
I mean, a couple of things. First of all, you can do a lot of the type of things we're talking about, the sort of design-based, project-based approach, which everyday materials. I visited great places. There's a toy maker in India named Arvind Gupta, who has this book called Toys from Trash. He has kids making their own toys from things they find on the playground and in the yard. So there's lots of things you do with everyday materials. But also the good news is we're fortunate that technological trends are bringing down the prices of digital technologies. So things that once were inaccessible are becoming more accessible. There still is some access gap, but that gap is shrinking, and more types of digital technologies are becoming accessible. So you don't have to have the advanced technologies, but new technologies are becoming more accessible. So I think that's helping in this issue.
I think talking about that, when we started Nuvu, we actually had no shop at all in the first year and a half. We had nothing. We had scissors and snips and stuff, and I think that the educational experience was as valuable as the experience that our kids are having. I think what's happening now with the whole kind of maker culture is that a lot of these things are becoming cheaper. And this is, a lot of the schools that we work with, even the ones that don't have the means, I mean, they can buy a very cheap 3D printer, they can buy a cheap laser cutter, they can get all these robotic stuff very cheaply, they can recycle a lot of these from previous projects. So within, I think, the last 5 years, things have shifted a lot dramatically, even around kind of the availability of these technologies.
Thank you.
You've all talked about these amazing new ideas. I'd like to shift your focus to a place like India and how you scale in resource-constrained places like India. The US has this amazing history of higher education, and now that India is coming out of the dark ages, Indian higher education is trying to replicate what was done in the US over the past 100 years. Tom, SUTD is, of course, a fantastic model, but that requires a lot of resources. How do you see this kind of model working in a place like India?
Yeah, again, I think echoing Mitch, I think it's more attitude than it is resources.
Sorry.
More attitude than it is resources. I think that you want the faculty and the institutions to say, we're going to change the way we're teaching. We're going to not do this passive, traditional lecture-based education. I think you can do this at scale. I mean, you don't have to have three teachers in the classroom like we do. I think you can do it in other ways. But it requires, I think, a shift in the mental model. And the mental model is going to be this new engaging way of teaching and thinking. The issue is that most of the faculty have grown up and been educated in another system, and now we're trying to throw them into this system. So it would take, I think, a fair amount of education and of sharing the things that some of the more innovative places are doing. But I don't think it takes enormous resources, but I think it takes a mental shift, quite an important mental shift.
I completely agree with that. It's really all about the institution and the faculty, and mostly about the faculty. And the resource issue is a minor issue in this. I mean, you can have like machines that are like $1 million each and stuff, but you can also do it without having those at all. You just need to create the right institution with the right kind of leadership, and then train the teachers in this kind of new way, and then magic will happen.
So I think we have time for one more question, and then apologize to those waiting. They can talk to our speakers after, but we'll take the last question. Go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Jay Hellman. I often introduce myself as an overeducated real estate developer. And the overeducation is 5 degrees from MIT, 3 in electrical engineering. So I don't think like a normal real estate guy, but when I saw the title of this symposium, I was incredibly excited. I'd like to change a word and tell you the question I asked in 1980. This says, the campus, then, now, and next. I was developing office buildings in Washington, D.C. What I wrote in 1980 was the office building, then, now, and next. Now, in 1980, the PC wasn't quite invented, but because of the MIT education, I saw it. And the image in my mind was a tractor and the C&O Canal. Before tractors, everybody was a farmer. Today, nobody's a farmer, and there's a heck of a lot more food. Office work before computers was farming before tractors. The analogy to education and the campus is virtual education is only getting better. The question is, which Christina was your first question, what's the relationship between the physical world and the virtual world? Well, the term I invented to describe it in my thought process was virtual adjacency. The ability to do something as though you're there without actually being there. Now, I'm carrying in this hand the iPhone, which in 1980 I could not have said iPhone, but if you look at what I had been writing, you would see iPhone. So what I'd like to do is really ask the panel, which I think you've all been trying to do in the last day and a half, to relate the increasingly powerful, flexible, and individually tailorable and responsive virtual adjacency world to the experience of actually being someplace. I'll give you one hint. My conclusion for the office building is the future of the office building is going to be more like a club than a factory.
Well, I would argue that universities are largely a social enterprise, It's a place where there's room for personal growth of young people. It's a place of transition for young people. Gerhard Casper, the president of Stanford University, gave a great talk on this many, many years ago. We tend to think of universities as places where it's just knowledge dissemination, and that's the wrong view of a university. One of my nightmares, and maybe the next panel will discuss this, is that we've got kids all around the world taking all their freshman classes, sitting at a keyboard, looking like this, right? Never looking up, never seeing another individual, no social experience at all. I'd rather have them all go to Bali, and then we can do this all in Bali so they have a social experience together. But I think we shouldn't underestimate the value of that social experience that happens at universities. And I think all the things we've been talking about are largely social experiences, right? Now, within those social experiences, we do knowledge dissemination. But my own thought on education is a triad of attitude, skills, and knowledge. Knowledge is just one part, but it's a set of attitudes we imbue in these young people that we develop, and it's a set of skills they develop, and part of those skills are interpersonal skills, their growth skills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think one shouldn't think of it as the factory in that sense, in terms of knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination.
I think the time is...
So I think we're out of time, but a great note to end on. Thank you very much to the panel. It was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.